Welcome to the Talent Optimization Podcast, the go-to podcast for CEOs and HR professionals wanting to bridge the gap between the strategy and tactical implementation of talent optimization within their organizations. Through interviews, predictive index, and personal experience, your host, Tracy Shirk, helps you discover the facets of talent optimization from both a CEO and HR perspective to truly create the dream team for your organization. Are you ready? Let's get started.
Welcome to the Talent Optimization Podcast. My name is Tracy Shirk, and I'm the Chief Talent Officer here at Elevated Talent Consulting. And we are in episode 124, and we are chatting today about HR audits and the infrastructure inside of an HR department. And yes, we are in the month where we are talking about HR self-care. And you may be going, okay, Tracy, you're telling me that audits are going to help me take better care of myself. I know. Hold up. So here's the deal. When we have a structure in place and we know exactly what winning looks like, we are much more likely to be able to hit those boxes and get things done, right? So here's the thing. When there are strong processes and procedures in place, we know exactly what needs to happen, and we don't spend a lot of time thinking about it and energy going through it with those key items. Because let's face it, there is enough in your day-to-day life as an HR professional, as a people manager, as an organizational leader, that when we know, hey, here's the compliance things that need to be done from a state standpoint, from a federal standpoint, and here's our internal policies, check. It makes life so much easier because we know that we're following the policies and the procedures. And there's a process to look at it on an annual basis. So that is what we're going to chat a little bit about today. And one of the things that we really like to look at here at Elevated Talent Consulting is the distinction between a foundational HR department, and that's really your compliance. That is the old personnel, right? So your foundational HR department will be things like payroll. It will be things like your compliance and your HR files and all of your reporting, et cetera. So we're going to chat about that for a little bit. So for those of you that are either new to HR, that are looking for a list, those of you that have been around a while, but you're like, I wonder if there's something here that I could potentially be missing. We're going to run through that list. And then we will chat a little bit about what does it look like to have a transformational HR department. And for me and for us here at Elevated Talent, that's really where the fun comes in. That's where our people strategy comes in, that we're really aligning and listening to our executives and stating, hey, and our business owners, what is that objective that you specifically have? What are the things that are most important to you? Because so often they're not mentioned in people terms. And as HR leaders, we sometimes will miss what is needed from the executive level, and we're going along with what we're doing. And a lot of times that's very tactical. And so we want to be able to bridge the gap between those two items. So that's exactly what we'll talk about within our people strategy and within that transformational HR audit. So let's go ahead and get started. All right. So what is a foundational HR audit? So the foundational HR audits are really the audits that go through all of your compliance items inside of your organization. And if you email us, let us know if you're interested in this. We actually have a whole course on this. So we will link the course in the show notes that walks you through it. It has all the templates, all the tools, all of the things. So there's a couple things here. One, we're going to start with the employee file audit. Within the employee file audit, there's several different files that you may or may not need to have, okay? And here's the thing when we start looking at this. If you're a small organization and everything is still in paper, this is gold. If you're a much larger organization and you have things through a payroll or a human resource information system, it should already be tracking these for you. So you shouldn't have a ton to do with this. However, knowing why the systems are set up the way they are and being able to audit that can sometimes be incredibly helpful. I can't tell you how many organizations we've walked into that have robust HRIS and payroll systems to find out that, guess what? It was never set up correctly to begin with. So we had to go back through all of the paper files, do the complete audit to determine, hey, is this going to work or not work? So with that being said, we will start with the employee files. So when we're looking at the employee file audit, there's a couple things. One, who has access to it? Because your employee files should be double locked. And yes, that is a legal requirement that they are double locked. So if it is paper files, they should be locked in a file cabinet inside of an office, right? They're not sitting out for anyone to walk into and see. If they are electronic, then they are going to be specifically inside of, let's say it's an HR folder, then inside of that HR folder, maybe there's one by department or et cetera. So they're double locked that way. So when we look at those employee files, a couple things we want to make sure are not in there is anything medical, right? We do want to make sure that there's nothing medical in that employee file. So those all need to be kept separate. If you have DOT, Department of Transportation, and you have drivers, your driver files are going to be separate. So a lot of times you'll have an employee file that's specific for the organization, then you'll have a DOT file that is separate. If you're still using employment applications, I want you to look at it and I want you to ensure that you understand what your state law says, because there's been a lot of applications that have been not been updated, yet the state laws have been updated. Some examples include no longer requesting salary information. Another example includes not asking if they have any arrest or conviction records specifically on the application. Again, we go into that inside of our course in a little bit more detail. However, definitely wanted to point that out here if there are applications that you are still accepting. Then, of course, the offer letter, which we love to say that the offer letter is like the front cover of your book, right? So every employee that comes in, you've got a book on them. You're going to open that book with their offer letter. Once you open that offer letter, you're going to have their signed job description. You're going to have your signed employee handbook. And guess what we close the book with? Their resignation or termination letter, okay? So in the employee file, of course, goes their offer letter. Now, in your offer letter, if you have any pre-employment screenings that you do, ensure that you're getting the sign-off on those. And again, much more detail in the course on that, but just make sure you've got the sign-off on anything that you're doing within pre-employment screenings. Then, of course, you have your state and your federal W-4 forms. Your handbook acknowledgement, any emergency contact form that's needed. One note on emergency contact forms, make sure that whoever needs to have that has access to it. So it's not locked in HR when you run 3 shifts and HR is only there for first shift, right? So just ensure things like that and ensure that the information on the emergency contact form does get updated on a regular basis. So I will tell you a fun story here within emergency contact forms is if they're not updated regularly, things can change, right? Phone numbers no longer work, spouses are no longer spouses, parents pass away, whatever happens, right? So fun little story. I had an employee, she had a medical issue, went to the hospital. I pulled her employee contact form out and called what I thought was the husband. Nope, not the husband. It was the ex-husband. Guess who showed up at the hospital? The ex-husband. Guess who did not show up at the hospital? The husband. All right. So we just want to make sure when we're going through these that we're checking for the items to ensure that they're accurate. If you're electronic, fantastic. Highly recommend everyone going electronic because then you can send out an email or a list on an annual basis that says, hey, please update these things so that we specifically have them. So we have our medical files, our training checklists, our I-9 binders, right? These are the foundational HR audits that we definitely need to ensure that we have. When we look at additional things within HR, we're looking for our workers' compensation. We're looking for a poster audit and our OSHA 300 logs. So these are all items that we're going to audit. And every single one of these items should have a very specific process that we go through to look at. So as an HR professional, or if you're somebody that drew that short stick in HR and you're like, yeah, all this stuff landed on my lap, I have no idea what I'm doing. Guess what? You are in the right place. So, those are those key items that you want to take a look at. So go back and look at our show notes today, look at the transcript and you can kind of pull these out as you dig through them. So that is your foundational HR audit. Here's the thing. There are, so many federal and state and local municipal laws. You can't know it all, but you do have a requirement to know. And so that's where you want to ensure that you have that HR expert in your back pocket to really support you to be successful as you are creating, your HR audits, as you're going through and creating your HR infrastructure from the ground up. Because guess what? You can't know it all, but what you can know is you can specifically know the questions to ask. So what we've gone through so far is, hey, there's some key questions that I need to ask about the employee file. There's some key questions I need to ask to ensure that we have the medical file separate from our employee file, that they're double locked, et cetera. So those are some key things to think about when you think about that audit. So now I'm going to shift to the transformational HR audit. And this is really where we start to look at how do we inspire our people to perform? Whereas our foundational HR audit is saying, hey, let's make sure we have a functioning department. Incredibly important. Let's make sure it's functioning. Let's make sure it's compliant. Let's make sure everybody gets paid, that they get into the system, all of the things, right? That is absolutely needed. So then when we shift over to transformational, this is where it gets fun. This is where we say, okay, what are the business needs of the organization? Where do we need to go? This is where we look at culture. This is where we look at talent pathway plans. Do we have a process to move folks from entering the organization on day one, truly training them so that they are up to speed in 30, 60, 90 days. They know exactly what they need to do. They've been given a mentor and tools in order to be successful. And then they're rolling along really well in their job, right? So how are we checking in with them on their engagement? How are we checking in with them to see, hey, is this role what you thought it was? How are we checking in with them to essentially say, look, you're a valuable part of our team here, and we want to grow with you. And creating that environment where we can give feedback that individual can truly hear. And that is where the fun begins, right? So when we look at our transformational HR department, here's some audit items that you can look at. Do you have an orientation program that really ensures that individual is connected with somebody right away on day one? Do you have an onboarding program that takes them through every expectation on their job description and aligns them with the job that they need to perform and aligns them directly with the cultural items of the organization? Now, when we provide new hire buddy and mentoring training programs inside of organizations, we're actually creating a passport for staff within their first 90 days that's specifically aligned to their job description, where we're essentially saying, hey, here's the things you need to know. We're going to stack it. So week one, we're going to take some base level items, then we're going to build on it and build on it and build on it, so that job description that they look at does not feel overwhelming by the end. So that's a key item in our transformational HR audit, right? Is that mentoring, that new hire buddy onboarding program. The next thing that we want to look at is Has our team truly been trained? Do we have some leadership opportunities available for them? Do we have a talent pathway where individuals can see where they specifically go next? Have we touched in on things that are important to our employees? So are we doing a survey, for example, that specifically looks at what are the things that are important to you? This could be a benefits survey. This could be an amenities survey, right? And so we're looking at those, and we're also looking at productivity of staff inside of the organization, because you can add all these great things and not have it impact productivity. And that is a miss, right? So when we look at, the bridge between human resources and our executive team, we want to ensure that we're creating that bridge so that executive team doesn't look at it and go, why are we spending X amount of money very specifically on these areas and we're not getting a return on it? So as an HR professional, if you haven't gone back and listened to episode 121, where Sam and I chat about, the $500,000 problem that he solved inside of his organization with the help of our hire program, we're not hiring the right people and we're not growing them in the right way because they didn't have the onboarding program and we hadn't engaged our staff. So those are the key things you start to look for. Where's the pain points that our executives are having? That is a business problem. And guess what? Every business problem has a people aspect to it. So let's figure out how to translate it. And that then goes into your people strategy. So when we create that people strategy, it's looking at those key business problems, aligning it to, what HR can be doing in our project-based work outside of the day-to-day that tells us what winning looks like. When we know exactly what we need to do every day, we're given some autonomy in our role to do it. Guess what? That has us feel good and fulfilled about our role. That right there, my friends, is HR self-care. Why? Because we're creating the plan for our success and we're aligning that to what the organization needs. There's nothing better than that feeling of creating those things together. So for a recap for today, we talk a lot about HR self-care this month. So how do we create self-care for ourselves within the processes and systems inside of our organization? One, we want to do a foundational HR audit to ensure all of our compliance pieces are in order. If they are not, guess what? That becomes something that then goes on our people strategy so that we can align it out and have enough time to truly execute on it in order to meet the business needs. Then we step into what is the transformational HR audit, which is looking at, hey, how do we move individuals from having to be here at work to wanting to be here at work? So how do we engage them? And we look at our different ways of engagement, and then we build that back into our people strategy. So it could be that we roll out a mentoring program. It could be that we create talent pathways through the organization. It could be that we start to align our roles and really calibrate those positions, which we'll talk about in the next couple of weeks. And so that is our transformational HR audit. So with that, as a key takeaway for executives listening in today is really, do you have a people strategy that's aligned to your business strategy? And if not, that's something just to sit down with your HR team and have a conversation about, because what it does is it aligns your leadership team, your HR team, and your key priorities together so that they can be executed on and everybody knows what that winning looks like. And then for HR listeners, again, do you know what winning looks like for you in your role? If you don't, go ahead and circle back around, connect with your team and really say, hey, let's go ahead and dig into some of these key things. We know we're going to turn some things up, but then at least we know what we don't know, and we can create a plan in order to execute on them. So with that being said, thank you so much for joining us today as we talk about HR audits and some of those processes. If you want more, we do have our HR audit course available. And let's say that you're going, hey, I actually am interested in the 6-month program of how to build your HR department from the ground up. within the Hire program. That program will start again on July 11th, and we would love to have you in that program. Feel free to reach out to us, and we can definitely have that conversation. And all of those links are in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Talent Optimization Podcast. You'll find more tools and resources for CEOs and HR professionals looking to bridge the strategies versus implementation gap of talent optimization at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. We've also created a free, valuable resource for you to begin bridging the gap called the Talent Optimization Foundation Membership Program. You can access it for free at elevatedtalentconsulting.com/foundation. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode to learn more about talent optimization and creating a dream team for your organization.